Welcome to Black and White Finance's expert video series, where we bring you insights from industry professionals to help you navigate the property and finance landscape with confidence. Today, we're joined by Anthony Gavalas, with 20 years of industry experience for CBRE, one of Australia's best property advisory teams. He's a division director of the commercial property mortgage team. He'll be helping us understand two commercial asset classes, the industrial and the office space. We'll cover where the market stands today, where the market is going in the next 12 months, and what an investor should consider if they're thinking of getting into this asset class. Let's jump in. Welcome, Anthony.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to sharing some insights today. I think we'll start off with industrial, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course. So on that topic, let us know what has happened in the last 12 months in this asset class space.
Yep. The industrial market has been really resilient over the last 12 months and performed really well. New South Wales has seen record low vacancy in New South Wales, high levels of investor demand. Now, when you're in a situation where there's really low levels of vacancy, rents grow, and rents really did grow, and we're talking about sort of 30% growth year on year, which is unheard of.
That's massive.
Yeah. So we're in a situation when even when interest rates were rising, value levels held. And that's purely because rental growth, we had that really good rental growth with low vacancy.
What's driving that rental growth?
It's the lack of supply in the market. That's what it comes down to, lack of supply. So I think vacancy rates were approximately 1%.
For industrial?
For industrial, which pretty much says there's no vacancy.
Yep.
Today, though, it is a slightly different story. So we are seeing vacancy increase slightly. Mm-hmm. We're seeing rents stabilize. Mm-hmm. And we are seeing landlords having to offer increased incentives to attract the tenant.
So what is driving those trends though?
Look, what it is essentially affordability, right? And just general economy, right? There's a weakening of the economy, and so we're seeing, rents stabilize. Like we've had massive growth. It's not unsustainable.
Mm-hmm. So Anthony, you're saying industrial is somewhat plateauing now, but what's causing that? Is that
Yep.
supply? Is that new stock? What is that specifically?
Yep. I think a general weakening of the economy is one factor. Affordability issues, given that we've had such significant rental growth in a really short period, I feel like tenants are really feeling the pinch. And lastly, yes, there has been a bit of supply coming into the market in the industrial space in particular. So all those sort of contributing factors have resulted into where we are today.
Okay, thank you. That paints a really good picture of the last 12 months for industrial. Now let's turn to office. So the office asset class, what would you say has, I suppose, been the trends over the last 12 months?
Yep. So the office market has definitely experienced tougher times over the last little bit. There's no question.
You could even say 18 to 24 months even, right?
Definitely. There's no question that our working habits have changed. Mm-hmm. And that's evident in small companies, large companies, working from home, etc. They've changed.
Yep.
And this has resulted in increased vacancy. It's resulted in tenants downsizing. It's also resulted in tenants changing their mindset of what they want. So what I mean by that is a flight to quality.
Yep.
So tenants are requesting higher premium, better quality space as opposed to cheaper, older style alternatives. Now, this is essentially to encourage their staff to come into the office.
Yep.
And also it's changing habits in terms of sustainability.
So just on that flight to quality there, you're talking about those tenants and their employees demanding a nicer workspace to work in a better environment to try and encourage their employees. So this is tenants having their employees come back to the offices. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely. So there is that flight to quality. Tenants are demanding or wanting better quality space So not necessarily in a smaller environment. So downsizing, but better quality. So the reality is you're actually still spending the same, but you're getting a better quality space, which is, more conducive to a better working environment and encouraging your staff to come into the office and enjoy their work balance.
Yeah, no, I understand. And so if we sort of compare and contrast the two, so industrial has done, in terms of an asset class, has done really well over the last 12 to 18 months with, like you said, 1% vacancy rates. But on the other hand, so juxtaposing here, asset classes here, the office has been quite dull, hasn't really performed well at all. But you're seeing things change. So I think this is a really good segue now. So let's talk about the two asset classes again now, going into the next 12 casts, without crystal balling or you giving us your forecast or exactly what's likely to happen. What are some trends or themes or things we're thinking are going to happen in the next 12 casts?
Our view is quite positive and optimistic. Whilst I think the next 12 months will be stable, now what I mean by stable is minimal rental growth and minimal yield movement over the next 12 months.
This is for industrial and the office?
For both.
Asset class.
For both. And I think commercial in general.
Okay.
Our view for a bit more medium term, so 12 to 24 months, is more positive.
Okay.
Now, there's a few contributing factors to this. One being population growth. Australia is earmarked for significant population growth within the next couple of years. Second is supply issues. Now, with the current market conditions, construction costs, interest rates, struggling end values, any new supply coming onto the market is going to be suppressed because it's so hard to get anything off the ground at the moment. So that's another sort of factor. And the last thing is sort of government spending. The government's spending a lot of money on infrastructure, public transport, health, defence. So when you consider those factors, limited supply coming onto the market the next couple of years, population growing, government spending money on infrastructure, public transport, I think there's cause to be really optimistic in commercial real estate in sort of 24 plus months, which is a good sign.
Yeah, definitely positive for both. And then I suppose you can sort of paint both asset classes there, both industrial and office, with that same brush in essence.
Definitely. Yeah.
Would you say that there'd be a bit more of growth then in office with, I suppose, those hybrid work environments changing, with staff returning to work, with, I suppose, those types of numbers changing?
I would, and we sort of saw, looking at the numbers, analysing the data, up until 2024, yields were still on the rise. However, only ever so marginally. This really suggests that we're at the peak.
Okay.
So as at the start of 2025, data really suggests that we're at the peak, which again is positive moving forward. Hopefully we'll see a few more transactions and, better results moving forward.
Okay. So that makes sense. And we understand, I suppose, what's happened in the last 12 to even 18 months. Like you said, something you've even gone back as 24. So thank you for that. And then we know, I suppose, what we feel is, our view that's quite positive for the next 12 to 18 months for both industrial and office. If someone's new to this asset class or thinking to diversify out of, say, residential property into commercial, okay, and they're thinking of office or industrial, what are some key risks? And we've touched on these now, but what are some key risks you believe they should truly understand before they get into this space?
Yeah, sure. So these risks are common for both asset classes. So we'll talk about both. Essentially, commercial property, for the most part, is an income-producing asset. So things that you need to consider, I guess, would be, any potential increases, say, in outgoings. Now, in particular, the big ones are your statutory charges, so council rates and land tax. These can, significantly increase, and the reality is they're unforeseen increases. So I would always recommend people structuring any lease deals on a net basis, whereas your tenants essentially are liable for the payment of the outgoings, which essentially protects your net position. That's a really good one, I think, for anyone looking into the market, having that conversation about structuring lease deals on a net basis.
So if you're buying an established dwelling or established property, an industrial office, if the tenant's covering all the outgoings, that's a positive.
That's a positive. Your net position is only going to go up.
Yep.
Essentially.
Understood.
Another thing to consider is what I touched on earlier, is that flight to quality. So essentially, tenants' demands are changing. There's been a generational shift in terms of who's actually leasing property, who's running businesses these days.
Yeah.
So there really is that flight to quality. People want better quality space, not necessarily cheaper. Well, it's not cheaper. They just want better quality space. So things to consider is when you're investing, you might need to do a refurb to attract the tenant. Now, again, what I touched on earlier, in this market, it is costly. Construction costs being where they are is costly. So again, something to consider, overcapitalization, something that you don't want to do, but it is a consideration.
On that then, so if a tenant, so let's say you do have a tenant covering the outgoings, and the tenant does then, or the actual office space at its current present state is in a decent quality, or it's got great finishes, do you then look at the tenant as well? Do you then look at, okay, well, what if it's an established property and there's a tenant in there? So you've ticked those first two boxes. Do you then look at the tenant's strength as well?
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a really good point, tenant strength. But also just having those boxes checked just puts you in a really good position for no vacancy. And that is ultimately the goal with an income producing asset, is minimizing your vacancy. It's all about minimizing vacancy, essentially. You will know, being a broker, serviceability is sort of key.
So the lease term as well. So how long they've got to go on the existing lease, how long's left to go, what options are there?
Definitely.
I want to touch on that. Like, I suppose for industrial or office, what would you want to see in a lease if you're buying an established, you're trying to set one up?
It depends. I mean, it really depends on size.
Yeah.
I think in the sort of up to $5 million range, I think a typical lease term is 3 years.
Yep.
And that's the same for both.
With options?
Yeah, with options, 3-year options, 3+3. And that's the same across office and industrial.
Yep.
When you get a bit larger space, they can extend to sort of 5+ years.
Would you say, like, when you're saying offering incentives, is that something like a rent-free period?
Yes.
Would you talk, like, for industrial office, what would you say would be a typical rent-free period?
So traditionally industrial, there was no incentives being offered for industrial space.
Or when vacancies are so
low, there was next to no incentives being offered. Come to today, it's very common for landlords having to offer 10 to 15% incentive.
Well,
now this is again all considerations that you would need to have regard to when investing in an industrial asset, and the same goes for office.
Yep. Same.
The same. Office actually is slightly higher.
Yep.
Depending on what market you're in, but a good sort of benchmark would be sort of 15 to 20%.
Okay, understood. So would you apply those same fundamentals to an industrial or an office space in, say, metro versus regional, or would you think to adjust those?
The fundamentals are similar.
Yep.
When you start going sort of more metro or regional locations, they do change slightly because the rents there are more effective, which means the rents are lower.
Yes.
But less incentives offered to the tenant.
In terms of factors, new entrants into the market should consider, are there other risks that you believe that should be considered?
Yeah. So look, when entering the commercial market, especially if you're an investor, so you're looking to generate an income from your asset. I think tenant strength is a big one. Essentially, that tenant is going to be paying the rent, so you need to have confidence in their ability to pay that rent. So doing your DD in that regard is paramount. It's important.
So understanding the tenant's profile. So not necessarily going into the fundamentals or into their financials, but what's their reputation? Like how long they've been around for? Exactly. What other sites are they occupying? That type of, to get a real feel for whether or not they're going to be able to afford these lease repayment or these rental payments for the next 3 or 4 years.
Definitely. Where they sit within the market, within that particular location, within that building, how comfortable they are, all considerations that you should have regard to when investing in commercial real estate.
Okay, understood. And then you're the best person to know. That's how you're valuing these things. So when you're actually valuing this, you're literally going through all these types of factors, and the banks are relying on this valuation report that you're preparing for them.
Correct.
Is there anything else you think that a new entrant should focus on, or you believe they're the main fundamentals?
They're the main ones. With the current market that we're in, we are in a time of, weakened economic sort of climate.
Yep.
So there could be a situation where your property is vacant for a prolonged period of time. So again, another consideration which you should have regard to when entering the market.
Okay, so look, the last thing maybe we could touch on is just having like your team behind you. So due diligence, and it does go without saying that you need to have your solicitor there that supports you, your broker, that's a plug for us. And then you've got the valuer, a plug for yourself.
Yep.
But then are there other, like you can do, I suppose if you're going to construct, well then that's a different conversation, your feasibilities and QSs and whatnot, but let's not go there. But key stakeholders, who would you say for industrial and office?
I think having a really good relationship with your local agents, they're on the ground every day.
Yep.
They live and breathe their market, and they're going to be your best, I think, first point of call in terms of understanding the market, both demand, who's renting, what type of stock is renting, what isn't renting at the moment, what's selling, what isn't. So that would be my first point of call.
They're probably really good questions to ask. Like they could be like your first opening questions to your real estate agent.
Exactly. So that would be my first sort of point of call. Obviously, speaking to valuers also would help. But real estate agents, I think, who specialize in a market and also as a class, are invaluable.
Okay. So definitely real estate agent, ask those valuable questions and they'll give you a lot of insight there. The valuer to understand whether you're paying fair market value for it, or unders or overs. And then your solicitors and your brokers for the finance piece. And I suppose that then you'd be able to have your key stakeholders there to support your financial decision. And so Anthony, that really does paint a pretty good picture for both asset classes. Is that right?
Yeah, it does. I think, with the points that we touched on, population growth, lack of supply, government spending, I think there really is good cause to be optimistic in the commercial real estate market over the next short to medium term.
Anthony, thank you very much for sharing with us your insights today on both asset classes. We appreciate it very much. It's clearly a lot to consider with both of these investment types.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having me, and it's been great to share these insights with you. Cheers.
Like any investment, knowing the key risks for each asset class, like these two that we've just spoken about today, is key. It's very important to do your due diligence, like Anthony has helped us touch on today. Please stay tuned for more key insights from our Black and White Finance video series.